See you.
And
So
clear the floor for the next speaker.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the next speaker is going to be Pablo Reda, who's going to talk about Forth and OpenGL without floating point. Pablo, have at it.
Hi, thank you, Ulrich. I share my screen. Okay. This is my odyssey about using OpenGL without floating point. OpenGL is a standard of GPU programming. Is a API for rasterizing triangles in 3D, have near many system scale. All of internal number are floating point, and this is OpenGL. This is now all the future is Vulkan, but it's much more complicated. I try to using OpenGL in my version of 4 called for R3. R3 not have floating point by design. The actual version connect with any dynamic link library, but only with integer parameter. Floating point parameter is a mess. In early OpenGL API calls, you need a floating point parameter, but new API call not. I think because it's much more efficient copy the memory from CPU to GPU in block and not parameter but parameter, and then the new function prefer copy chunk of memory, and for me this a good news. And then I try to make OpenGL programs. I show how different version of R3 manage control the IO with the operating system. Previous R3 incarnation have in the virtual machine the words for making, for example, graphics. Then this is the main dictionary of R3, and this is the word, the tokenizer in C. And when, for example, I make graphics, I need to define the words for make graphics, and in the virtual machine need to call the access to this function. For example, here making lines and set the graphics or playing sound, and then I have a problem when I try to make a new capability to R3. I need to modify the interpreter. R3 can be compiled too, and the compiler is in R3 too, and the compiler have the same problem. I need codify the routine, the code for make lines or graphic or whatever, and net call to function to make this. But in seeing the UA4, I think the Brad Nelson UA4, this is a PC version of SP32 Brad Nelson used for this PC4 a very good idea is make only word for load dynamic library and call for and call this this function with a fixed quantity of parameters, and with this type of connection only need this word for make this load a library, get the address of the library, and make the call with 0, 1, 2, 3 parameters, and then with this I make all the connection with any DLL. This is this is the word of R3, and this is the word for IO communication. This all. When I compile R3, this is a little more complicated. This is the call for example, 4 parameters, but only need this word for any dynamic line library. Well, how work? For example, in the R3 communication with SLD library, SLD library is a library for make graphics multi-platform. Do this for this connection. Load the library, and with the address of the library, I get one by one the function I need, get the address of the function, and store in a variable, in a local variable, and then make a word for call this address with the correct number of parameters, and then now I have access to the, in this case, SDL library without modify the interpreter or the compiler, and this is a big advantage. Then with this, I have access to this library. Well, then here the previous version, call to API wire in interpreter and compiler. I say previous of this, and now with the idea of UF4 from Brad Nelson, I make this modify and now call any DLA. Then I start to learn, or I try to connect to OpenGL when I release this change in the use of floating point parameters. I don't have this capability. Well, then I make I found first when I start, I very confused with library with like Leu or GLF, while I don't understand why why this library, what doing with library. And then I found is a local library and GL get prog address that this function make the same I do with the DLL library. Then when I have access to these two functions, I can make the same with to get access to OpenGL library. Then I do the connection with OpenGL and start to make access to these functions here. Then when I use the OpenGL, I call this library with include and access to every word who I make the link. One piece, I need one more piece for make this work is transform fixed point to floating point. Big reg scale here in this meeting show a similar problem in previous meeting. I have a fixed point numbers and need the representation in memory of this number in a floating point. Only the representation in memory, not necessary operate with this memory because I need for transfer this number to the GPU. And then with this word to transform fixed point and to floating point or floating point to fixed point, I can fill the buffer to OpenGL and send to GPU to work. These two words for make this are here, fixed point to floating point. The only strange thing is I need a shift with signal. With negative, need a shift right, and positive, a left right. And this is the work for in R3 to transform a fixed point in floating point and have the inverse to floating point to fixed point. In this case is for example, real format file from object, 3D object or animation or whatever, and need to convert to fixed point for work in the R3, in the fourth R3. And I have another word for integer to floating point, but it's not very useful. Well, with this and the connection, I make this simple example. Is like hello world for 3D graphics. Is make a triangle shaded, and I need use only function call with integer parameters, and then I not have to use a function from floating point parameters and only have a use function with address to chunk of memory with the floating point parameter. For example, here I make three chunk of memory called B0, 1, and 2. Here I make a 32-bit every word and convert every fixed point number in a floating point representation exactly exactly here, fill the vectors, take this memory and convert to floating point, and use this call to OpenGL and pass the address of the vertex for make this triangle. Well, this is working. I'm very happy to see here when I release it and start working to advance in the OpenGL. For still OpenGL, the best place is this layer OpenGL. I do with this web page make every demo here, and of course need to transform the C code for R3 and first make a cube, rotated cube with texture, then make load an object. All these graphics I do in previous version, but all in CPU. And for example, the load of object file format I already have. I advance in more example. Here I start with multiple objects. I try different capabilities. Every of this source code have more and more complication. For example, the recent, you need a constant, you need a load, a shader, a fragment shader, and a vertex shader. You need a pass parameters all in floating point to the fragment shaders. You need, for example, make a camera. Here I fill the buffer with a vertex, normal, UV, and an index. I call to draw this object here. An interesting question is about need a matrix calculation, and I have a matrix calculation of all code. For example, this is a matrix with all fixed point, and I have a matrix calculate perspective matrix or orthographic if you like. I need calculate the matrix for camera and multiplication and rotation and inverse matrix and so on, all in this case, and only need transform to floating point only when I send to the GPU. But prior to send, I have all in fixed point. For example, in this web page, this is a shadow mapping example with the explanation how do shadow mapping in C, and this is, for example, this is my version of the shadow mapping, with camera moving. And this is the same example. only with the connection with SDL library. And I make a bitmap text. I make a more complex text called multi-signal distance field text with I can change very easy the size of the text. And the last demo is my goal is make a simple library in 4R3 for make 3D games. And this is a start to make a third-person example with terrain movement. And have another example is a load a format library. I have another more pretty. This is load a format file of 3D characters. I don't I have problem with the bone animation with this character. I not finish them. Perhaps someday I can make this. This is how work ugly. And this is an example. Well, the last demo is I like to show you. This is a full demo, and try to convert this to platform to write 3D games with exporting characters and then. Well, this is all. Thank you. Any question?
Wow, great.
Impressive.
Very nice.
3D
Impressive.
graphics, high-end graphics driven from Forth.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
That is cool.
Are there
Is the
any
code
questions?
online, Pablo?
How again?
Is the code, is the source code online? Is it
Yes,
on
yes.
GitHub?
Yeah, yes. Download the code, and this is whole here. It's window only. I am searching for a Linux guide to make the part
Port. Yeah.
for make R3
Yeah.
multi-platform. The previous version, the version I show you with need modify the virtual machine for call the API. This is multi-platform: Windows, Linux, Raspberry, and Mac. But I don't make the Mac and Linux version. Some guy help me, but I waiting for make this version multi-platform. I prefer programming for and I don't like to program C to make the connection and then make this.
Excellent. Are there any further questions? That's not the
Yes,
case.
Christian
Yeah,
has a question.
Christian. Yeah, sure.
Hello, Christian.
Hello, Christian.
I watched this and I'm impressed, but I still wonder, how did you get OpenGL usable within Forth? How did you integrate this? Did you rewrite the whole thing in Forth?
Yes. Only need the connection with the driver, the vice driver for the GPU for the.
But this has always been a puzzle for me. How do people go from Fort to a library that is in another language? OpenGL is in C or whatever.
Yeah, you need load a library with OpenGL capability and use the same function I use.
But you
Well,
created them all in Fort.
yes. Only have the address of the function in the VC driver. Is the only.
So OpenGL was only used as a model, and you implemented that model in Fort.
Yes.
That's impressive.
Yes.
I have to read what was OpenGL. I didn't even know what it was. So thanks.
No, Christian, to answer your question, I think I have a clearer answer to this. What you're looking for, Christian, is to look what is called a calling convention. On a given operating system, libraries always have very definite calling conventions. So as long as you in your assembly code, which we've seen the code that Pablo showed us with the sys0 and sys1 and sys2, this was Windows calling convention, and it was implemented in assembler. And this is all you need to do to call onto a library that can be in any language. So when you're going to look on Wikipedia or something, you look for calling convention, and you'll learn about that. So this is what Pablo was doing.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Bill.
he used calling conventions to call something that was within Windows. Okay.
Yes, this code was Windows
Essentially-
specific. So when he was saying that he was looking for a Linux guy, this is because you need to know what Linux calling convention is, and if you want to run a NetBSD, it's going to be another calling convention and stuff like that.
Essentially,
The
Christian, the driver doesn't know what language is calling it. It has no idea.
Yeah.
It all looks the same.
Yeah, they're often called FFIs, or foreign function interfaces. So some forts have those foreign function interfaces built in, but even for other programming languages like Python, there are foreign function interfaces you can load a DLL, for instance. I think there is some support in, for instance, Gforth, SPForth. I think has also got this foreign function interface. Some of them are better than others. So some of them are very low level, and you can load a DLL, a library, and you have to manually. I think that's what's being done here. You have to identify every single. But there are some that have got higher level interfaces where you can analyze, for instance, if they supply a C header. And I've seen Forth code that parses those C headers and produces the Forth equivalent of that. So that makes it a little bit easier to integrate. And in fact, there are builders for this. I think is it Swig is one of them?
Yeah, Swig.
To build a target language from an interface specification.
Yeah. So we've been talking about our schedule going from monthly to bi-weekly, and maybe it's good to have workshops in these cafes and a closer look at some of these topics. So my proposal here right now would be having some kind of foreign function interface DLL calling workshop in March. No talks, but just hands-on and have a look at how this works. And we pick a system and we can demonstrate how you invoke library functions. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, second question for Pablo.
Yes.
I also have the impression that you had a challenge adapting Fort and OpenGL because you didn't have floating point. Is that, and you had to make fixed point look like floating so that you could use the OpenGL. Because I heard you talking about conversion between fixed point and floating point. Why did you have to do this? Was it because you didn't have floating point?
Yes, yes. The question is the OpenGL prefer now a chunk of memory with floating point inside. Then I don't need have the floating point number. Only I need have the memory with floating point number. Then I can convert fixed point or integer in this floating point representation and store in memory and send to GPU. And I see the opportunity to make this without have floating point. I don't have floating point in my system.
Mm-hmm.
I hate floating point for simplify.
So you found a way around it.
With floating point, we have a lot of problem. We have the problem of precision, of comparison, and you have variable resolution. I prefer fixed point. And this I see this opportunity and work very well. I don't see Vulkan too much, but I guess Vulkan don't have a function with floating point parameters.
I think for your next presentation, Pablo, I'd like to know how you did that simple little part there. Make fixed point look like floating point.
Well,
Because
Bill Rex explained very well in a previous meeting. He need convert a different format of floating point and make this transformation. I need a transform fixed point and floating point, and this is the two tiny words. Both need the knowledge for make this, and it's not very common, but exists.
Mm-hmm.